A lot of us who are creative people out there experience moments of depression that are extremely deep, like the lowest possible valley you could possibly picture. And at the same time, what I think is true is that the people who experience that also tend to experience excitement on a level that's much more vivid, hi-fi, than everybody else. I think the people that can manage their expectations and emotions are usually not the most creative people, or they've learned to do it, because this is actually very critical to keeping forward progress and momentum when you are an artist, musician, producer, mixer, anybody who works in a field where you put in hours, days, weeks, months, years, and you don't have any idea if it's ever going to amount to anything. That unknowingness of what will happen and is this the right thing to do? It's basically like you're walking around in a maze, a long maze where you have no idea how to get out of unless you get to the end, and where the end is, you have no idea. And this is what I want you to realize, okay? It's not uncommon. I go through it all the time, and I just went through it recently, but I've learned to manage this. But whenever there's a chance of something that could happen, something where I could get lucky, like a situation where I might meet someone, or I might, be able to play somebody a song or share something. These moments where we build up in our minds this excitement or this fantasy, this dream, okay, where something could work out for us for the better if, and it relies on someone else. In other words, someone else needs to agree that this is great, sign off on this, sign you to this, bring you to this place. All of a sudden, if they do this, this will work. So basically, the luck that we are fantasizing about achieving is tied up in someone else. As soon as that happens, someone like me, and probably a lot of you, we wind up climbing as if we're on a hot air balloon that's taking off into the sky, and there's only so much fuel in there to keep that thing afloat. And the higher up we go, the further we fall down when the fantasy falls apart, when it doesn't go exactly as we planned, when that moment never happens that we built up in our head, this creative, person's fantasy. The more creative, the more crazy the fantasy, the more vivid, the more anything could be different, not work out as you expected. And then no matter what, you're going to be falling at that point. You fall into that pit of depression. Now, what I've realized, and it took me a long time to realize, is that when you experience that thought that, oh, if this happens, that could be great. This is the key, okay? You must not allow yourself, as someone who's super creative, you have the ability to get way higher up in that hot air balloon than somebody who doesn't really have that much creativity going on. If they don't really care as much as you might about getting there, then they'll never get as high as you. So when their balloon runs out of fuel and they fall, it's not that far of a fall. And that's a lot of people who don't experience these huge ups and downs. I don't know what it is about you that's different, but I generally think most of us creative people, we don't experience these little bunny hills of a raise and fall. We go up there, man. I know I do. I get up there when I'm thinking about if this happens, and then if I just get lucky with this, it's like I'm climbing. So what I want you guys to realize is when you feel that happening, it's okay to let that thought come in for a second, but don't rely on the luck. You got to calm yourself down in the same way that a scuba diver can let their emotions run away with them. If something spooks them and they get scared and all of a sudden something's happening, scuba divers train to be able to make sure they keep their composure, keep their calm, so that they actually make it out alive. As soon as their emotions take over, it's all over for them. They'll drown. So it's so important to maintain that. There's actually no difference for us. Because when you raise up on that balloon, man, you could fall down into a deep pit of depression in which you wind up drinking when you're an alcoholic, or you wind up doing drugs when you're an ex-drug addict, or you wind up crashing your car because of a number of things that, and you hurt yourself really badly, or somebody else. There's no real difference between the scuba diver losing control or you losing control with excitement, which is basically the opposite of the fear, right? And I feel emotional about this because I experience this all the time. I experienced it recently. I allowed myself to get carried away with luck, with the thought of, if this happens and this happens, something great will come from it, and that will rescue me from the maze that we all walk through. So I basically realized that I stopped betting on myself in those moments. I gave up. I said, it's not in my control anymore. I give over control to you, to some person other than me, who could take me from where I am and bring me to where I want to be. That's actually the opposite of what you got to do if you're going to keep going tomorrow. That guarantees you that you will fall, and you won't just hit the ground and then you can keep moving. You wind up falling from such a height that you get buried under an avalanche of mental blockage. You're in a pit that you cannot get out of without serious struggle, which is the reason we try to climb out. It feels like that when you're super depressed. You try to climb out of those places. So what I'm saying is, when you realize that we're all in a maze, and anybody who bets on luck, all you're doing is creating an eventual depression for yourself. You're creating an eventual moment where you stop realizing that if you would just do the work every day, you just put in the effort on a daily basis. That's it. That's what belief in yourself is. It's actually believing that you know the answer already. And if you just keep doing what you're doing, it will work eventually. That's what it is to have belief in yourself. When people say, believe in yourself, that's what they mean. They mean believe that what you are actually, your decisions that you're making on what you should be doing is the right thing to do. Just like, and there's no right or wrong, there's no way to quantify this. Like, for example, I could spend 2 days straight or 3 deciding on a workflow that either sounds better or doesn't on some freaking song that nobody's ever gonna hear, and I spent all this time doing it. Was it a waste? Is it not a waste? Like, the truth is, if that workflow, that with whatever determination I make in the moment, gets me to the point after that where I use the answer that I came up with there from all that time I spent, and I use it to go forward and do something else that does get heard, does work, now all of a sudden, it's worth it. But you never know going in. And that's the part I think so many people are scared about. It's not even scared. So many people wind up sitting down in the maze. You picture that maze, you're walking around looking for the way out. Like, we are all in, if we're creative people, looking to get recognized or looking to get to a point where we feel like we are successful. In whatever definition you have for that. We all have different ones. If you're that, you're in that maze. And what I want you to realize is that maze doesn't have a clean floor. There's bodies all over that maze. And every single person who sat down, they're just sitting on the floor, looking at their phone or twiddling their thumbs or reading freaking newspaper. I wouldn't know who does that anymore. But the point is, if there's bodies all over this thing sitting down. And those are the people who are looking for the luck. They gave up trying to get out. They're just planted. And if you realize that no one's ever coming to find those people, there's tons of them. You're walking over bodies as you're walking through this maze. You're walking around them. It's not a clean floor because so many people find it too difficult and they just can't trust themselves long enough to get to the end. They can't trust that if they just put their hand on the wall and keep walking around this thing, then just by holding onto that wall, they won't retrace their steps. They will get out eventually. So many people don't get that. That's why the maze is covered with bodies. That's why there's so many people that tell you, you'll never make it. You got to get lucky. Never going to make it. You don't have a chance. You got to get lucky. In my opinion, all those people just gave up, and they might as well just go back the way they came and go to work for somebody else, or go to do, the thing they didn't want to do to start with, which is why they started doing this. This is what they really want. This is their dream. This is their passion. But they just go back to doing the stuff they don't want to do. Because if you are waiting for luck, you're just sitting down doing nothing. That's what you're doing. And not only are you doing that, you're losing belief in yourself. You're actually getting buried under something that's impossible to get out of. Whereas once you build momentum and you start moving and you're going in a forward progress motion direction, right? Like for months and months or years or whatever, you're doing that. The worst thing you could do, and I do this all the time. As soon as something could go well and happens, I start thinking about that and I fantasize about it. And what I've realized recently is the more I fantasize, the more I climb. That hot air balloon keeps climbing to the top of Mount Everest. Now, when something goes wrong and that doesn't play out, it plummets and I am buried in a pit of depression that I cannot get out of for weeks or days or months. I mean, it could be really bad. So what I've learned from this is not to let myself do that. As soon as I feel myself climbing, and I know it's based on someone else that needs something to happen they got to do something for me to make this work, what I do is I stop myself. I say, no, I'm a scuba diver panicking right now, and I envision that scenario, and I don't want to drown. So in order for me to not drown, I must keep control of my excitement. Just like you got to keep control of your fear and your panic if all of a sudden something goes wrong and you're scuba diving. You cannot panic. It's life and death. There is no other choice, because depression could lead you there or stop you and halt your progress forever, potentially. Some people who sat down in that maze are never getting out, ever. And the way you do is by not allowing yourself to get that depressed. And if you are depressed, what I've learned is, and like I told you, I just fell down one of those holes recently. And this is how I got out of it. I focused on the things I could make a viewable change in, that I would feel like I'm getting something successful out of. Like, for example, I started working out again every day. I started eating right every day. I started cleaning up my house, stuff like that. Once you start doing stuff like that, you see a noticeable change. It builds a momentum that you can then use to keep it moving. And then you'll get back on track. That's how you climb out of it. But the way to not fall into the worst, deepest pit you could fall into is actually don't let yourself get to the top of Mount Everest betting on luck. That's how you don't do it. What you do is you plan for tomorrow. You plan for the day after. No matter what happens with this situation, if it goes great, I'll change my plans. And if it doesn't, this is what I'm doing tomorrow and this is what I'm doing the day after. You realize that by betting on the luck, you're actually letting go of your own abilities. You're taking what you are capable of and how amazing you are, you're diminishing it to a level where you need somebody else and you can't do it. No matter how you think, when you're betting on the luck, you're betting on the fact that you can't do it. You aren't capable. You are too weak to get there on your own. That's what you're saying. I don't think people make the connection, but that's what they're saying. So once you realize that that's what you're doing, it's very simple. Don't bet on the luck. When it starts getting in your head, that fantasy starts building, you cut it off. You don't let that happen. Plan the next day, plan the day after that, and say to yourself, if it happens, great, but I got no control over this. Repeat it like a mantra. I got no control over this. What you do in order to give yourself more chances at getting something to happen is consistent work every day. It's like bricks. When you do that, you build a house of bricks. When you bet on luck, you're building a house made of feathers, barely balanced together. If the wind blows just right, it'll stay up. And if anything else happens, it's all over for that house. That's your mental state. That's how you can operate in the world consistently. You need the bricks. The feathers don't work. So don't bet on the luck. And don't try to get pulled out of that maze. Don't sit down in the maze on the floor and say, if I don't get pulled out of this by somebody, I ain't going to make it. Because all those people I feel bad for, because they've already lost. No one's coming to save them. Anyone who thinks they could just sit on their butt and make it because they get lucky doesn't understand the world at all. You keep working and you build those bricks, and don't let yourself get to the top of Mount Everest with this fantasy, and then you'll actually get where you're trying to go. It will happen. That's what the way to win is. And this is what I also want you to realize. The reason it's so impossible for so many people to do this is to work every day and never know if what you're doing is the right thing to do, and never know if you're making forward progress or not. It's like you're working in the dark. You never know what's going to happen from all this effort. It could go to nothing. That uncertainty, all of that, that's actually why the reward is so great. That's why if you win, the success and the feeling that you will get from it is so great. Because there's all this uncertainty. Whereas the people that wake up every day and go to the 9 to 5 and work for somebody else, and if they just stay there long enough, they keep climbing up the ladder, doing something they don't want to do, making enough so they can eat. The people that do that, that's a sure thing, and that's why the reward sucks. That's why nobody wants to do that. That's the difference. If you want certainty of you put in a certain amount of time and you get somewhere, you don't want to do what we want to do. If you are in this boat, the reward is so great that you must realize the reason it's so great is because of all the uncertainty that surrounds it. That's why. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Ain't no free lunches. That's why. You get what I'm saying? Would it be great to get luck? Sure. And you let that come in and then you cut it off. And you put the effort and emphasis into what you're going to do tomorrow, if this doesn't pan out, what you're going to do the next day. That keeps you on track. Believe in yourself. Keep believing in yourself. Do not think that you need the luck. And then I'll also tell you this, if you're in a position to get lucky and you have this mindset I'm talking about, what's going to happen is you'll actually be you, because you will have value for yourself. That's what happens when you don't think you need other people to get you there. When you think that, you have no value. Your value for who you are doesn't even exist because you need them. You're incapable. Whereas when you think that they need you, or this concept that your effort will get you there sooner or later, you're special now. You think that no matter what, you're going to get there. So when you're put in a position to be you, you will be you. You won't freeze up. You won't mess up. You won't think your whole everything is relying on this. And then people mess up. I mean, you're going to panic. Whereas if you build those bricks, you're a sturdy house. And then nobody knocks you over no matter how it goes. And then you can actually perform the way you would need to perform in order to get where you're trying to go. So I hope you get what I'm saying. I could go all day on this because this means a lot to me. And I have to say, it's not something that we ever just let go of. The thought that there's a shortcut out of this. There ain't no shortcut. The shortcut is to keep building the bricks. And then one day you get to the end of that maze. Bottom line. We all know we're coming. We have that sense of time in our head where this will be over soon. We got to get there now. And that's why everybody sits down in the maze, looks for luck, thinks it's impossible. Those people are out there. Don't worry about them. They're just people you got to walk around, step over while you're in the maze. But they're scattered throughout this thing. You keep your hand on that wall, you keep building brick by brick, you will get to the end. And you'll get there way, way, way more of a strong person who can survive being there if You do it this way. That's why so many people who are just plucked out of obscurity, they don't last. I mean, that's the reason, because they never built the bricks. They got these feathers up. Blows over anything. You know what I'm saying? Drop of a hat. All of a sudden, somebody sneezes, the feathers fall down. Can't win that way. All right? You guys got this. Piece of cake. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. I'll talk to you guys soon. You got this. Take it easy.